Excellent. So up next we have Nico. Nico works at Puppet Labs, as you saw in the intro in the beginning of the day, and he's going to give sort of a demo, walk through a bunch of stuff about Puppet. Most importantly, this is a great time to ask questions. If you have things you've been wondering about,
Thanks,
questions.
Cara, by the way. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah, and try to stump him too. You get the hard questions. No. Yeah, if you have stuff you've been wondering about, this is a great time to ask it. Feel free to interrupt Nico throughout in a polite way and ask questions as well. This time is sort of for you folks as well. So with that, enjoy.
Okay, everyone. Just one more thing on whatever, not Puppet 4 compatibility Martin was talking about. So two things, actually. When you upload a module to the Forge, you have certain tests that are run automatically. So for instance, this is a module I uploaded. And as you can see there, that is actually tested in 3.7 against future parser, which is current parser in Puppet 4. That's one thing. Second thing, and I think I already told someone in the audience when they asked me about this, unit testing, okay? A lot of people say, why should I write unit testing? I mean, I already write the Puppet logic, now I'm writing basically the same thing in the unit testing format. Well, nice thing about unit testing, for instance, I'm using Travis for my integration. I have a lot of servers, I never know where to put Jenkins in, so Travis is just there on the cloud. And the neat thing about Travis is I'm actually testing my code, you can barely see that, but basically against 2 versions of Ruby, and 2 versions of the Puppet gem. So I'm testing it in gem 3 and gem 4. So I basically give a test case. I know this is not for beginners, but if you need any questions on testing, I'm happy to take them afterwards. But basically what I'm doing here is I'm giving a test case where I set a couple of parameters and I set a couple of facts. Okay, an example of how the class would run, and I expect a result. Okay, and I test that with 2 different versions of the parser. So start writing unit testing. It doesn't only help you with moving into Puppet 4, but actually when you have to refactor code, and eventually we all have to refactor code, this is the best way to find out if you didn't break anything. Okay? So, with that said, let's hope that this works. Yay! Hello everyone, my name is Nico. Don't try to pronounce my last name, it's Italian. Don't worry about it. I'm a technical solutions engineer at Puppet Labs. So basically what we do is we help mostly from a pre-sales perspective. Okay, so post-sales, you generally deal with support or professional services. Now, in Puppet Labs, technical solutions engineers have to be really technical. We actually report to a department called customer success. So our sole responsibility is that if you're working with someone from sales in Puppet Labs, you get the right solution. I have been a sysadmin for over 10 years. I work in Red Hat as support and as an instructor. I work in IBM. Orbitz, I don't know if you heard of it. That's a company in the US that basically used to sell plane tickets, hotels, kind of like Expedia. Symantec, Rackspace. I started working with Puppet around 2011. I think it was 26. Nigel, correct me if I'm wrong, please. And it was mainly around fixing other people's code, and since then I work with some other automation tools. Now I actually have the pleasure of working in the company that actually makes the automation tool I love the most. I don't know if I'm going to pronounce it right. Ich bin Argentinier. So before we talk about Puppet, let's clarify a couple of things. This is a gaucho, as depicted by Argentinian artist Molina Campos. This is slightly funny. But you know what's really funny? This is really funny. Okay? For non-football fans, Germany kind of scored 7 goals to Brazil in their home, so that's pretty cool. Huh? Awesome, mate. Yeah, that's the spirit. Okay, so how about you guys? Raise hands. How many of you have been using Puppet for more than 6 months? Wow. More than a year? More than 2 years? Great. How many of you are actually using Puppet Enterprise? Really? I mean, really? Okay. So, probably... I'm not going to comment on that. I mean, It's open source software. I come from the open source world. I think we have Red Hat colleagues here who will probably have the same kind of issues I have now. So how many of you use Windows as a primary platform? Whoa, interesting. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about today, it's useful for beginners, but it's also useful for people that haven't used Puppet Enterprise before. So I'm going to try to guide you through the basics around Puppet, how to handle a resource. Okay, and I'm going to show you a little bit about Puppet Enterprise, okay, and why we think it's great. So, how many of you have been a sysadmin for more than 5 years? Great, so I don't really need to explain this, but if we go back in time, and I love my little history lesson here, the whole IT for an organization was a couple of mainframes, and that was it. Okay, still required 4 to 6 people to manage each one of them, but kind of single digits computers. In the 80s, now we start seeing the advent of microcomputers. We have specialized systems based on either power, alpha, things are still in the market today. And then on the 90s, everything went as we say in English, pear-shaped, when Intel made its break on data center. Now we have commodity hardware, so hardware that is really cheap. So what did companies do? Buy servers, buy a lot of servers. So now we're talking hundreds. Fast forward to now, on top of that, you have virtualization and cloud. So now you're talking about thousands of servers. Now, many of you are already using Puppet, so I don't need to ask this, but the question I always ask is why there are still people, handling thousands of servers as they used to do with single-digit servers. And they did that through manual configurations, which, of course, yeah, sure, it's great. I can read a document, repeat a set of steps. That always works, except when, as a system administrator, you generally get bored and start missing on a couple of steps. Then you have custom scripts. Again, great. Instead of putting it on a document, I just write a set of steps, a set of commands I need to have something executed, which has 2 issues with it. First, it generally, when you take that script out of the context it was supposed to run in, it doesn't work so well. And second, I could probably read your scripts and understand them, but it would take me a while to get used to your coding style. And same thing would happen if you were to read my scripts. Golden images, those are great. Right-click, clone, you get 10, 20, 30 servers. Now the problem with that is, well, those servers are going to be alive for a while, and we actually need to manage them. Okay, so, and then there are legacy tools, which are basically, an all of the above kind of thing. This just doesn't work. No, when I was in Madrid yesterday, and I was talking to it was basically a manager in an MVNO, in a mobile operator. And they said, we went from 1 release a week to many releases a day. With those kind of expectations, infrastructure just lags behind. These kind of methods just don't work. So what's our approach? Is to define the desired state of resources. Okay? A service, a user, a package. We describe that desired state. We describe how we want that configured, and we do it through the Puppet language. Okay, and that language, if you understand English, it's pretty much human readable. Okay? A user may belong to a certain group, may have a certain shell, a certain home directory. That's about it. It's its desired state. Now, something interesting, and a lot of people don't see it from this perspective, is that a user is basically the same thing on Windows, on Linux, on AAX, and on Solaris. Okay? So why would you actually have to configure it differently on different platforms and do it manually? You could just use the Puppet abstraction layer. You just define that user, okay, and you let Puppet automate and implement it on different platforms. So what's kind of the Puppet traditional workflow? How many people are using Puppet kind of in a standalone where you just pass it code and in a single server in a masterless environment? So we're, okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay. So you can, of course, use Puppet just locally passing code, applying that code, okay, and have it run, and that's it. The preferred approach is to have a Puppet master. Okay, so that Puppet master basically holds the Puppet code, and it would never send the code to its agents. What it would send actually is a catalog, okay, with the definition of those resources. Okay, but you first have to start by writing Puppet code, and Puppet code basically look like that for anyone that hasn't seen it before, which I guess it's not a lot of people in the room. Okay, but basically it's pretty human readable. So in this case, the desired state is for the SSH service. Okay, again, service is just a resource, and SSH is the instance of that resource. And we have to ensure that it's running and that it is enabled at boot time. Okay, that's it. Now, we support a lot of them through our built-in providers. People have talked extensively about type providers today. But that's also extensible through modules in our Forge. The neat thing about Puppet Enterprise, and I think that's personally why I loved using the tool so much, is that it's actually built for system administrators. So right now, system administrators are probably spending maybe 80% of their time just doing repetitive tasks and 20% innovating. And what we want is to actually turn that around. Now, if I were to tell you, instead of just repeating tasks, just go and write Puppet code, you would probably tell me, well, it's kind of the same thing. I mean, I'm still doing 80% admin and 20% innovation. So the whole idea around Puppet is that you should actually reuse code. Okay, don't reinvent the wheel. Just go into the Forge. So who, I guess everyone here is using the Forge right now. Who is not using modules from the Forge? One. So we have basically 3 categories of modules. Okay, so we have the Puppet supported modules that are basically written by Puppet and have the same support level as everything in Puppet Enterprise. Okay, so if you have a problem with any of those modules, you can just, if you have a Puppet Enterprise subscription, raise a ticket or give us a call and we will help you. There are certain modules that are Puppet Enterprise only, and that's basically because, well, they were developed with certain partners. So there are 2 that come to mind. The F5 load balancer module. Who uses F5 load balancers? Okay, so basically you can handle most of the repetitive tasks from the LTM module, such as adding and removing pool members and stuff like that, from the F5 module. And the Microsoft SQL Server module, okay, that allows you to, well, install SQL Server, deploy features, and deploy an instance as well. Okay, these are basically the supported modules. Okay, there are a couple of them, things like MySQL or Apache, Nginx. Just to show you a quick example, when we talk about MySQL, just the idea of being able to deploy a MySQL instance with a couple of lines of code, that's actually pretty great. Now, there is one that we launched a couple of days ago. How many of you are using AWS? Not that many. So a couple of days ago, we released the AWS module. And this is really, really interesting. And here is why. It allows you to basically manage AWS resources as you would manage any resource in Puppet. So think about actually your whole infrastructure just being defined as code. Okay? 10 EC2 instances, so 10 compute resources, 1 network, 1 load balancer, these DNS routes. This can all be defined through the AWS module. And of course, it can be versioned, and it's handled by its desired state as well. So if someone goes and manually destroys a server that is in production, Puppet will go and create it back. Okay, so that's pretty awesome. We are planning on doing similar things with other cloud providers. So, as said before, we define the desired state of any resource. Okay? Next step could be to simulate. So the Puppet agent can run in what we call no-op mode, as in no operation, in which it would basically compare the desired state of the server to the actual state of the server, but it won't act on it. Okay? If you're using Puppet Enterprise, it will just send a report back to the master. This is very useful for people that have kind of very complicated change management processes that actually can have the Puppet agent going and enforcing the desired state on their platforms. So in Puppet Enterprise, you can actually have a webhook with those no-op reports to tie it into your ticketing system, okay, or just send an email, okay, or an IRC bot in order to just let understand what are the changes required in your infrastructure, and in your change window, you can maybe run it on enforcing mode, which is the default mode. So the Puppet agent runs by default every 30 minutes, and every time it finds that the desired state doesn't match the actual state, it will go and enforce it. It will change the system back to what's desired, okay, or what's newly defined. As said before, every time the Puppet agent runs, it actually sends a report back to the master so we can actually understand what changed. Are we clear so far? Do you have any questions so far? Good. So, let's do a little demo. I have a server here. 5, 4, okay, no one's laughing. So as you weren't actually running Puppet on Windows, I thought it would be maybe interesting to actually show them how it works in Windows. You will have to take my word for it that it does the same thing on Linux as well. Can you all see the screen there? Okay, so I'm going to have Puppet manage a resource. Okay, in this case, I'm going to have Puppet manage a service. So I'm going to do a Puppet resource service p Puppet, which is the Puppet agent. I can barely see there. Okay, and again, as in the example, we have the desired state. So we have a service that is p Puppet, and we have to ensure that it's running, and that is enabled at boot time. That's the current resource definition of the p Puppet service. Okay, if we actually go to the console configuration, and we go to services, and I search for the Puppet agent, which is here, basically it matches the state. Okay, so I'm going to send this to a file. And I'm going to use Notepad to edit it. Okay, this is our desired state. So let's actually have let's actually stop this. Let's change our actual state. Okay, and now that my service is stopped, I'm going to have the Puppet binary apply that code, but in no mode. Okay, so again, this is the simulation mode. It will only report back. It won't actually go and change anything. Okay, so hopefully you can see there that it's going to tell me that the service is currently stopped, but the start state is that that service should be running. Okay, so I'm going to run it in enforcing mode. And if I haven't lied to you, basically the Puppet agent is going to go and change that service back to its desired state, which in this case is that it's actually that it should be running. Okay, so we applied it here. I'm going to refresh this screen, and now the service is started. Why am I using short names in Windows? Or where am I getting them from? If you right-click properties on a service in Windows, it actually show you the service name. Okay. Now I did this actually on purpose to try to get you to understand something. I'm going to go to a Linux machine in my demo environment, and as you can see, I can run exactly the same command. Okay, and it will return me the same code. So a lot of you have been using Puppet for a while. Okay, let me try to get you a different concept in your head. How about you actually start managing infrastructure disregarding the operating system? Because there are probably a couple of things that you need to do across different operating systems. Okay, like setting certain security policy, or working with certain services. Just different way of seeing things. Now, I'm going to show you another example here. I have a user, okay, which is called Vagrant. So I'm going to check that user configuration. Puppet resource user Vagrant. Okay. So none of you have seen Puppet running on Windows before, right? Okay. Does that code look familiar to you? Isn't that the same way you define a user on Windows, on Linux, or on AAX? There are a couple of minor differences, right? So for instance, yeah, the UID, it's that weird Windows string instead of being, an integer. But it's still the same thing, it's still the same principle. Okay, I'm going to actually send this to a file. Okay, and I'm going to change the desired state. So I'm going to change the comment to managed by Puppet Enterprise. I'm going to save this file, and I'm going to have Puppet apply it. By the way, as you can see, in Puppet we have a policy. We do demos live. We don't have anything recorded or anything. So you will see me fail miserably trying to type commands and make mistakes. So as you can see here, the previous state was that the comment was Vagrant, and now the comment is managed by Puppet Enterprise. So I'm going to reload this. Okay? Basically, exactly the same thing. Yes? Hmm? No, in Windows it won't do it. So, it won't do it on Windows. I tried it. So, this brings us to the second very important feature of Puppet. I told you that basically, if the desired state matches the actual state, the Puppet agent won't do anything. As you can see here, I'm just running it again. Okay? And the agent won't do anything until the actual state changes. So in this case, it didn't do anything. I'm going to go and change this back. I'm going to name it Vagrant. Or I'm just going to delete a word. Okay, and again, it changed back. Now, what we generally do with those resources, I'm going to queue, is wrap them into classes, okay, which are the kind of minimal units of Puppet code. So you can see this example, this is basically what you would do if you were to install OpenSSH Red Hat. I actually ripped this file from a module, okay, which is the OpenSSH module. And in this case, we have another kind of resource. We have a package, okay? This package is the OpenSSH server. We have to ensure that it's installed. We have a file, okay, configuration file, which has a certain owner, certain group, and that we are actually getting from a module, okay? And finally, we have the SSHD service. We have to ensure that it's running and that it's enabled at boot time. Again, this is not scripting. This is SR state, so those dependencies have to be set up manually. Okay, so the package needs to be installed before the file is deployed. And as you can see, the service is actually subscribed to the configuration file. So every time the Puppet agent runs, if the file change, the service will be reloaded. So those changes go into production. So far, this is what you have been doing with open source, right? Bit better, bit worse. This is what you don't get with open source. So this is the Puppet Enterprise console, okay? So Puppet Enterprise is actually a full-fledged product, okay? It's not only the collection of open source tooling. So think of Puppet Enterprise as actually the collection of open source tooling plus certain proprietary components that basically bridge that gap of functionality between open source, what open source offers and what an enterprise needs, okay? Just to show you a couple of quick examples. When you log into the console, the first thing, yeah? Huh? The version I'm showing right now is 3.7.2. Okay, 3.8 is going to be out by the end of the month. And from a console perspective, there won't be any major changes. So when you log in, this is the first thing you'll see. This is the daily run status. Okay, so over the last 30 days, how many agent runs ended up in either failures, which are in red, or were run in no-op mode, okay, the simulation mode, how many actually had changes and how many didn't have changes. Now, normally it should be mostly green, okay? So your agents wouldn't be pushing changes at all times. If we go down, we have the list of nodes. So I'm going to just pick on one. Of course it timed out. I'm in the middle of a demo. Okay? And I just show you how to manage a server individually. That's great. Now, you probably want to actually group your servers, you know, and manage the configuration in the same way on all servers. So Puppet Enterprise can actually classify nodes into groups, and I'm going to show you that in a bit later. So for now on, when you go into a module, you will see that, when you go into a node, you will see that node is actually a member of a certain number of groups. And from those groups, it inherits classes. Okay, so for instance, this is a Windows server, and it's inheriting the Chocolatey class, which is a package manager for Windows. Going to go here to Linux server. Okay, and we have, for instance, that this node has been applied the NTP class. Again, you have the daily run status. Okay, and then you start seeing some profiling tools that I'm not, to be honest, some of them I haven't seen in kind of any other open source GUI or any other way to actually profile this in this way. So for instance, you have the runtime. Over the last 30 agent runs, how long did the agent took to run? Okay, if you have an agent running a production system, you probably don't want it hogging too many CPU cycles. So this actually starts helping you to understand how long is the agent working on your system. As said before, we have reports. Okay, each time the Puppet agent run, it will send a report back to PuppetDB, and you will be able to see it through the console. Okay, and you have metrics on that report. So, for instance, in this particular one, I had 69 events. 69 were successful. Okay, there were 68 resources changed. Okay, if there were services, there could be services restarted. How many were scheduled, skipped, or how many remained unchanged? In this case, 25. And how long I spent doing each kind of thing. Okay, so how long I spent doing config retrieval, or setting up cron jobs, or installing packages. Okay, how many I spent, starting, stopping services, retrieving files, and so on. Every time the Puppet agent runs, as you probably know, it invokes a process. Can anyone remember what's the name of that process? I'm showing you on the screen, guys. Come on. Okay, that process is called factor, and it collects a number of facts from your system. Okay, these are the kind of built-in facts. The ones are just available when you install Puppet Enterprise. Of course, this is fully extensible. Those facts doesn't need to be written in Ruby. They can be written in your favorite scripting language, as long as they retain a valid key value pair, or they can just be a text file, okay, with a key value pair. So we have a kind of business fact, if you will, here, okay, that is called data center. So this server is actually hosted in Sydney, okay, and this is just a text file that we drop on this box just to understand where this server is hosted. You can actually use this for all kinds of inventory things, but the real value of this is actually used to classify nodes. So this is the enterprise node classifier. It's bundled, of course, with Puppet Enterprise, and basically allows us to do grouping of nodes per facts. Okay. So for instance, here I have a group. It's called Linux servers. So in this case, for a server to belong to this group, the kernel should be Linux, okay, and the client certificate shouldn't be the master. Of course, I'm saying client certificate because all communication between agent and master is HTTP, but it's encrypted, and we're using SSL TLS 1.0, and we use the client certificates to identify the nodes. Okay, these are the matching nodes for this group. Okay, so these are the nodes that basically comply with those rules and hence belong to this group. Now, this is actually dynamic. If I were to add any other Linux servers that it's not the master, it would basically be the same thing. It will automatically belong to this group. So I'm going to go ahead and create a group, and I'm going to call it Tomcat Servers. I'm going to establish a hierarchy, so I'm going to say, okay, to belong to this group, you have to belong to the Linux servers group. Of course, all classes are inherited. And remember what Martin talked about directory-based environments. You can actually use those environments here. Okay, so you can have different versions of your Puppet code, maybe one for production, one for QA, one for test. Okay, these are Puppet environments. And those groups can actually belong to certain environments. So I'm going to just choose production here. I'm going to add the group. And I'm going to go ahead and add some rules. So for instance, to belong to this group, the operating system major release should be 6. And the data center should be Portland. Okay, as you can see, these changes are not immediate. I actually need to commit them. Okay, this is very powerful stuff. I could discard them as well. So I'm going to go ahead and commit these changes. Now, remember when I told you that Puppet Enterprise actually bridges the functionality between what open source offers and what the enterprise needs? So let me show you a little bit about those enterprise needs. So Puppet Enterprise has RBAC. Okay, role-based access control. You can actually connect Puppet Enterprise to your directory. Nigel told you about this Open LDAP Active Directory, and you can create roles for your directory groups. So you can actually be as granular as you want, and you can allow users to classify nodes, okay, or change rules, or add classes, or just change variables in classes. Okay. Now, basically, what you will see in Puppet Enterprise is that most of the functionality that is read-write has an activity tab. So basically, we keep tab of everything that changed. Okay, so if anyone would go and change something on this group, it would be reflected in this activity tab. So I'm going to go to the classes tab, and I'm going to add some Puppet code. So I'm going to add a class here, which is called profile Tomcat. I'm going to go ahead and add the class. Now, again, I told you that Puppet code should be reusable. So one great way of making it reusable is to expose in variables. Of course, give variables same defaults, okay? But expose those variables, because actually, for instance, this code is exposing a package and a version variable. Okay, so I could specify a version of Tomcat, and I could reuse the same code in production or in testing or in QA. So I'm going to leave it as default. I'm going to commit this change. And as you can see here in the activity tab, we have a new entry, so I haven't lied to you. Every time you change something, it's going to go into the activity tab. How many of you are using mCollective? How many of you have no idea what mCollective is? Okay. mCollective is an orchestration tool. So basically, it allows you to leave a task on a queue, okay? And asynchronously, the nodes would pick it up and just leave a report back on the queue. Okay, that actually can be read. So, for instance, in this case, I have just added a class, and I could either wait 30 minutes for the agent to kick in, okay, and actually retrieve a catalog from the server. Now, I keep talking about catalog. Do you know why I keep saying catalog? Because the code never, ever goes to the agent. That would be really insecure. Okay, why? Because in that code, as you saw in Martin's talk, and in some of our talks this morning, in this code, in your Puppet code, there is generally business logic. Okay, so the only thing we send to the agents is the catalog, the definition of the resources. Now I can actually use MCO to trigger a Puppet run. So I'm going to go here to, basically it's the master down and two CentOS nodes on left and right. I'm going to change to a user that actually has permissions to do things with MCO. And I'm going to just queue a task there. I'm going to do an MCO Puppet run once. Okay. Again, this is going to just leave a task, and as you can see, both nodes picked up that task, which basically sent a signal to the Puppet agent, and the Puppet agent started its run. Now, MCO can do a couple of things more than this, and it's also very extensible. Okay, and you will find there are a lot of plugins written and available in GitHub. So, for instance, there is one to just run a shell command. Okay, and then pick up the result. So let me show you a quick example. So I'm going to go back to this server, and I'm going to edit a resource, in this case, a package. So package bash. And I'm going to change the version here. So instead of 4.12.29, I'm going to do an ensure latest. Okay. So at some time, this will be finished, again, depending on Wi-Fi. Okay, but what I really want to show you is that MCO, for instance, can compare package versions. So I could do an MCO package status bash. And again, leaves a task on the queue, servers pick it up and reply back. So for instance, in this case, on my servers, I have 3 servers running 4.12.29, which is the version I was updating on the other one, and 1 server that has bash absent. Do you want to guess which server has bash absent? Haha. Just to prove you that it works on Windows as well. So, I mean, we all got hit last year with shell shock and heartbleed and all those vulnerabilities that made us miserable. But probably the first thing we wanted to find out is actually how many servers I have that are affected. This is live data. This is not queued 30 minutes. This is not a report that just comes back. This is live data. Okay, so right now in my servers, these are the versions. Now, if I had a newer bash version here, I don't. Too bad. But if I went and updated the bash version, it would actually show up here. Okay. There are a couple of more things you can do with MCO. Some of them were available on 3.7.2. We had, on previous releases of 3.7, we had a live management tab. that actually allows you to access this through the graphical interface. Now the thing is, we are refactoring the way we are going to present that in the GUI. So for the next couple of versions, the live management tab is going to be there, but it's going to be hidden. Okay, so if you want to enable it, that's fine, but just know that we are changing the way MCO is going to be presented in the GUI. Yes? How do what? There is a configuration file, which I can't remember, but I can absolutely make sure to send you an email about that. But it's just a set on a file with live management equals off to equal on. It's pretty easy to enable back. Any other questions so far? Great. So, I'm going to show you just one more thing. This is still running. Great. Yeah. No, no. Puppet Enterprise fully supports MCO, and the binaries are actually bundled in. So what I have here in my demo environment, it's a full Puppet Enterprise, including the UI if you enable it manually. Okay. So what have we been doing so far? Again, we have Puppet agents, different type of them. Okay. Whenever the Puppet agent wakes up, it collects those facts, as I showed you in the inventory. It sends them up to the master. The master will classify that agent based on those facts. We'll take the Puppet code that actually applies to it, and will return a catalog. The Puppet agent will, of course, compare that catalog to the actual state of the server. It will mitigate if needed. If it's running on no op, it will just compare, and it will report back to the master. Okay, that report is going to be stored in PuppetDB. mCollective, as I just told you, is an automation tool. Sorry, it's an orchestration tool. Okay, again, it runs on a message queue. It's fully asynchronous. Okay, all these components that you see here are actually bundled with Puppet Enterprise. So, we just finished that catalog run. Let me just show you one thing. So, how many times you probably got that question of what changed? Okay, what changed on this system? Why was it working a day ago and now it isn't? So we have this really amazing feature in Puppet Enterprise, which is called the Event Inspector. Okay, that allows us to browse changes, from either resources. Okay, if we have the file that changed, but we don't know what changed or why it changed. If we have know that changed, or from a classes perspective, what changed. So I'm going to, for instance, go with nodes. Okay, and we have the node we just installed Tomcat in. By the way, did it work? CentOS 6A 8080. What do you know? It worked. So, CentOS 6A, these are the changes. Okay, this is what changed in my infrastructure. So we have a number of firewall rules. Okay, we have a number of packages, a number of services. So, for instance, this service. Okay, why it was changed? Because on this particular file, on this particular line number, it says that this service should be running. So the old value was stopped. Now the service is running. It's the same thing with packages. Okay? Again, this package was absent, now it's present. Here's the file definition. We have here in our package, we have a file. Okay? It used to be absent, now it's a directory. I don't know really if you have any tool that gives you this kind of insight. Sorry, I just saw your hand. Okay, so the question was, if I have a file that is actually not a directory, would I see the unified diff between the contents? No, I would just see the MD5 hash. Because that's how the agent actually understands if a file changed. It takes an MD5 hash from before and an MD5 hash after. So that's how it understands that the file changed. Okay. Now, how you should know the file. Now, how you should track that change is again through version control. So if you are bundling that file with a module, that file is probably versioned as the rest of your module because you are all using version control, right? I take that as a yes. Yeah. You will actually be able to see it on the console back in the Activity tab. So if I go to Classification and I go to my Tomcat server script that I just created, you will see that at 12:52 p.m. somewhere time, I went and added the profile Tomcat class. So that's how you actually trace it. So for those who are starting with Puppet, probably the best way to go is puppetlab.com/learn. You have the training VM, which is absolutely a great tool. If you want to do it from top to bottom, it takes about 4 to 6 hours, just a VirtualBox VM with a PDF. So you download it, you have a number of quests, and that would get you somewhat proficient in starting to write Puppet code. You are all here, so you probably all know puppetlabs.com/events, where we have all the public training and gatherings, Puppet camps, it's all available there. I'm also available in IRC in case you have questions. I'm generally, when I'm in the office, which granted is not a lot, I'm available on the Puppet channel as Sgt. Pepper. How many of you haven't seen ask.puppetlabs.com yet? Okay, not a lot, but it's absolutely great. Go post your question, and someone from the community might pick it up and answer it. Okay, it's a great tool. It's honestly great tool, and we just launched it. Cara, can you remember how long ago we launched ask.puppetlabs.com?
December of 2012?
December of 2012. It's honestly a great, great tool for collaboration. And finally, I heard a lot of people who said they weren't using Puppet Enterprise. Why don't you go ahead and give it a try? If you go to puppetlabs.com, you can download a 10-node, time-unlimited and feature-unlimited trial. Okay, you can use it as long as you want. Really, give it a shot. I mean, it's a great tool if you're working, especially with large environments. So as you heard before, Puppet Enterprise is actually running on the JVM, okay, much like what you saw in Puppet Server in open source. Okay, we have setups up to 20,000 nodes. Every Puppet Enterprise master can handle between 500 and 800 nodes. And something that is absolutely amazing is the installer. It actually allows you to split your kind of different roles in different machines from the beginning. Okay, you just provide SSH password for, let's say you want to split and you want to have PuppetDB running on one node, you want to have the CA on another, you want to have the node classifier on another. You just bring up the Puppet Enterprise installer, and you just choose as an option, split install, you give SSH credentials of the machines you want to configure in different nodes, and Puppet Enterprise will go and configure them. Do we have any extra questions? Yes. SLES, I mean SUSE Linux Enterprise. SUSE Linux Enterprise is fully supported. You can run a master on it. It's actually on the website. If you have any issues, please feel free to let us know, because it's a fully supported. It supports running as agent, and it supports running as master. I think I was actually seeing it today. I think the only SLES that doesn't support running as master is SLES 11 or something like that. But I'm just going to Google it because it's faster. Really, if I had to remember all URLs, to be honest. Here it is. SUSE Linux Enterprise Server. Agent, both agent and master. Yes. I wouldn't believe you. So first things first, I don't use Foreman. I think Foreman is an absolutely amazing tool for provisioning servers. We also have an absolutely amazing tool for provisioning services in servers in Enterprise, which is called Razor. Okay, Razor has a slightly different concept, than some other tools. So when you get a developer ask you for a server right now, they would generally ask you, hey, I need a server with 4 gigs of RAM. So you would maybe go into an inventory, okay, find a server with 4 gigs of RAM, go locate an asset tag. Then if you're lucky, you had Pixie and it's working. So you go, set up that DHCP configuration, go and boot that server, install whatever operating system, and then install the Puppet agent. So what Razor actually allows you to do is to send an API call to Razor and tell it, find me a server with 4 gigs of RAM, go and provision it with this operating system, and install the Puppet agent and classify it with these classes, and that's it. Okay, so what Razor does is basically boots a microkernel via Pixie, okay, and has all that inventory information, as we just saw in the Puppet Enterprise console, back to the master. So you can basically do an API call to Razor, or use or with the Razor command line tool, you can just say locate this server and provision it with this particular operating system. And it supports Windows, it supports Linux, and it supports ESX. So to be honest, I haven't seen that profiling. I haven't heard anyone telling me you have that kind of profiling in Foreman. Do you have it? Great, I didn't know that. Another thing, how many of you are using Foreman with Puppet 4? Granted, you're going to tell me that we still don't have Puppet Enterprise 4 out. It will be out soon. Just we believe doing things differently. That's it. I believe Puppet Enterprise is a great tool. Foreman might be a great tool for you to use. To be honest, it's fine. It's just that what you do have to understand is there are certain companies that require a supported solution, and that's where Puppet Labs comes in. No, I haven't really used Foreman, to be honest. I have been told it's a great tool, but haven't really used it. Yes? Sorry, so what he just asked is around the upgrade strategy to Puppet 4, so to Puppet Enterprise 4. So you haven't been using Puppet Enterprise. There were a number of features that changed, mainly around the Enterprise console. Am I okay in time, Cara?
Yeah, you got a few minutes.
Okay, perfect. There were a number of features that changed in the Enterprise console. For instance, the node classifier is fairly new. All of those features, yes, we have an upgrade path. Okay, so from if you keep up with the different Puppet Enterprise versions, it will be fairly easy to get to 4. Another thing that we bundled in Puppet Enterprise 3.8, which is out now, are the deprecation warnings. So if you're running code that is not compatible with Puppet Enterprise 4, you will get a warning in the log. Okay? Hopefully that will help you. Now, it's pretty hard for a machine to refactor code. We understand, and probably you get it from Martin's talk, it's going to take some time, and you will have to go and invest some effort in actually going and change your code to be ready for 4. I said this at the beginning of the talk. I'm going to say it again. Write unit tests. Honestly, it's very easy. I mean, you can spend probably an hour and a half through the RSpec documentation, and that would be, just to show you a quick example. So I have a module on the Forge, and I'm going to here and spec. Okay. This is it. Okay, I create a scenario for that module. So if my Puppet code is running in Red Hat and it's Linux and the operating system in fact is Fedora, this should happen. Okay, write unit tests. It allows you to refactor your code just so much faster. Okay, and try to start using some of the CI tools. Travis is a great example. I always love mentioning it because it's just very simple to set up, and it's widely documented. It integrates with GitHub, and it's just creating a .travis YAML file with the set of tests that I want to run. So in this case, I'm running Puppet parser validate. I'm running Puppet lint, and I'm running a rake spec for the spec testing, and I'm doing it on different RVM versions with different versions of the Puppet gem. Probably as migration strategy, the best thing you can do is just have good unit testing. Do we have anything else? Yes. I'm not sure. I could get back to you on that, but I'm not really sure. They are both valid approaches and they're both supported. Probably the difference you have in the console that you can do in Hira is that node classifier has an API. So if you need to integrate with different systems, you can use the API for the node classifier. It's public and it's available. Again.
Ours was really crap, and there's a really good one by Camp2Camp. So we gave them some pull requests, use the Camp2Camp module. Which one is the good one?
The Camp2Camp one.
Ours was bad, theirs was better.
Actually, that's something on the forge. Should get some cleanup.
We just did a cleanup.
100 modules from the forge.
Yeah.
They didn't pass properly. So we cleaned up.
Yeah, actually, if you go to the Nginx one, you will see the referral to another very good module. Do we have? Yes. Yes. So as Nigel told you, Puppet apps are actually, across different projects. Okay, it could be open source and it could be proprietary components. So I'm going to just really quick. So this is what you just saw about Puppet apps. Okay. Now 3.8 is going definitely into that direction. So as you can see here, we're starting bundling the first components for node management and code management. Okay. So particularly in the 3.8 release, you won't see any GUI changes. But what we are doing is some of those components that we actually need are now being shipped and supported. So for instance, R10K, you heard about this tool today. So R10K is going to be shipped with Puppet Enterprise 3.8 and it's going to be fully supported. Razor was being shipped since Puppet Enterprise 3.3, I believe. In 3.8, it's going to be fully supported. It's going to drop its technology preview status. And we're also working, on top of what we already have. So the AWS module is one example of how we're doing, how we're moving across to the node management metaphor. The Docker module is also a very good example as well. I'm not sure if it already got to approved status. If not, it's going to happen this week. But Garrett's Docker module allows you to just basically, again, define your containers as code and just have your tasks run into them. Okay. Moving forwards, there will be a lot of functionality added, not only in the GUI, but in the core of Puppet Enterprise. One of the things we are seriously considering is for organizations that don't have version control, we are going to ship a version control repository in Puppet Enterprise. It's going to be Git. So, and the workflows to R10K, all these things, you will see a lot of improvements over the major releases of this year. Okay, which are going to be at least one, if not two, major releases. Yes. Do we have any more?
Is that it?
Yes. I don't know, but I'm happy to find out for you. Nigel, do you know that one? If Hira 2 will work with Puppet 3. Yes, I had one around there. Sorry, event? Sorry, I didn't understand the question. I don't know if I didn't hear it. Sorry. Oh, better. Ta-da.
Hi. So is there any plans to introduce event-triggered Puppet runs, such as a package just got uninstalled, and that event can trigger a Puppet run?
No, I don't think so, because it's still a bit far away from the principle of Puppet. The base principle of Puppet is just ensuring the desired state around resources. So if that package gets uninstalled, okay, what basically would happen is in the next agent run, it would be installed back, okay, and you would have a report actually telling, this package was absent, is now present. Okay, now, and as far as tracing goes, you would have to look back and see why that packet was, for some reason, missing. I know if that answers your question.
Yeah, partially, but I was looking at very fast recovery time. So the moment the service goes down, it's in, and then instead of waiting for the next run.
Okay, no. Well, the other option is you can have the Puppet agent running, in a lesser interval. So by default, it's 30 minutes, but you can configure it. You can have it run every 5 minutes. It's pretty fast when there are no changes to implement into your system. But then again, you have to take into account in your infrastructure that those are more catalog compiles and so on. So you have to take into account when you scale your master.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Nico.
Danke. And if you need anything else, just ping me around.